The momentum we've got is hard to beat, right? We would need to probably quadruple our playing budgets just to have a shot at staying in the Championship.
Humphrey was building a career in television far from the football pitch, but teaming up with Rob McElhenney and Ryan Reynolds to buy Wrexham took him somewhere he never expected.
We knew we were going to do a documentary from the jump. Rob messaged Ryan, the text message back was just like, call me. And Ryan was basically like, I don't want to sponsor your team. I want to go in halves with you. We command a level of sponsorship money that is unthinkable at our level. But we fight tooth and nail for every single point.
Do you think one day Wrexham will play in the Premier League?
I think it's very possible.
Humphrey, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Jay. It's very good of you.
How do you get people to buy into a dream that you've got or come on a journey that you're excited to go on as you did with Rob and Ryan?
Yeah. I think, I think that what I've discovered over the last kind of 4 years is the power of passion to a certain extent, the power of enthusiasm, the power of, being unwilling to kind of take no for an answer, which if you'd spoken to me 5 years ago, I was the king of taking no for an answer. I was like, no, great. Okay, I'll go over here, just have a sit facing the wall and thanks very much. For anybody who doesn't know sort of our story with Wrexham, start of lockdown, I was working on a TV show called Mythic on Apple TV, which Rob co-created with my wife, as it happens. Huge dollop of nepotism in there at the start of this, like all posh boys that wind up anywhere in the world. We were all sent home for 2 weeks. LA was like, go home, it's going to be 2 weeks, we'll sort this out, and then, you'll come back to work in 2 weeks. So we all thought we had 2 weeks paid holiday, and everybody was we had a big group chat for all the writers, and everyone was like, oh, you should watch this. I'm watching this show, I just saw this movie, or play this video game, because the show that we were working on was about video games. And I told Rob, watch Sunderland Till I Die, this documentary on Netflix, because he had been sort of razzing me about the fact that I like football and was very American, like it's boring, all they do is dive, there's not enough points, blah, blah, blah. And he watched it and fell in love with it. He's like, I watched 14 hours of this in one day, basically. But this is crazy, it's amazing. We should do this. To which I was like, what do you mean we should do this? Like, how do you mean? He's like, well, if a team can go from the Premier League down to League One or whatever, they can go the other way, right? It's like, well, yes. He's like, well, so we should buy a football team and then we should make a documentary about it. And again, my natural instinct was like, well, yeah, that sounds awesome, but like, why? Like, how? Who's going to sell their football club to us? Who's going to make a documentary about us doing this? Who's going to do this, that, and the other? But, as a lily-livered company man, I was like, yes, boss, sounds brilliant. What a great idea. Turned and sort of rolled my eyes at my wife. And then the next day he was like, right, I found a broker firm in New York that does this kind of thing, Inner Circle Sports. They help sell Liverpool to Fenway Sports Group. They help sell Bordeaux to whoever.
So he had speed of action at this point.
He is
the next day he was...
Oh, yes. Rob hates sitting still. He is unable to... one of our great sort of culture clashes between us is that I am a very contented person and he's a very discontented person. And actually where I think that has helped us is to find a sort of equilibrium in the middle whereby... he's the sort of person that will be like, I'm not content to take no for an answer when it comes to buying a soccer club in North Wales. And I'm the sort of person who's like, well, I think you should be content with the fact that we need planning permission for the building we're building. And it creates a kind of path through the middle. And that, that relationship has also evolved over time with the introduction of Ryan and the introduction of Sean Harvey and the various different elements that go into kind of the operation of the football club. But it was, it's been a good sort of mixing of cultures, really, that's got us to quite a good middle ground, I think.
And can you tell us how that influence has rubbed off on you personally?
Yeah. Well, I think it's made me... I have seen the value in not just accepting what I'm handed. As I said, one of the things that I pride in myself, or I'm grateful for myself, is I have a level of contentment with my life. I love my wife. I love my dog. I like my house. I love working for the football club. I like still getting to work in television, kind of on the side as well. I am able to, I'm not driven by a desperate need for anything or a want or a desire, which is probably unlike a lot of the people that you have on the podcast that have reached this point. I'm contented by that. But what has rubbed off on me is a sort of a willingness to challenge and to question and to go like, so why are we doing this? Like, why do we just because this is how it has always been done, that doesn't mean it's sacrosanct and we shouldn't revisit it and decide, well, actually, there's a better way of doing it now. Time, technology, people, something has changed, and actually maybe we could do it this way that might be overall produce better results for everybody.
And if you ever said to Rob, like, where does this come from inside you? This need for more, this constant pushing, this I mean, the great phrase, this why not us approach to life that he has.
I know 100% what it is. And he would forgive me for saying, this is going to sound like I'm making fun of him, but I'm not. He was a very small, slight guy. He says himself, he's like, I don't think I went through puberty properly until I was about 19, 20. He was desperate to be on every sports team at school, but like could not, he was 5 foot when he was sort of 18.
Yeah.
He couldn't play in the sports. He couldn't do the things. He couldn't join it. He couldn't achieve any of the things that he wanted to achieve. And I think in that like crucible of like a Philadelphia area Catholic, like all boys school, very like, it's a rough, tough environment. It forged him into somebody who is like, he is someone who is constantly, I need what's next. I need to go beyond where I am now. And it has brought him this extraordinary success, both as a creative person, but also now as a businessman, as a football club owner, as a producer of television, as, he has, very similarly to the model that Ryan has now. He has an ever expanding business around him. And that is driven by the fuel, the nuclear core at the center of him is like, I've got to do slightly better than.
Has it also given him happiness though? Because one of the recurring messages that we get on this podcast is from high achieving people going, don't be like me, because it's exhausting to constantly need more in your life and never feel that the cup is full.
Yeah. Well, I think I would argue that I come back to my thing about contentment, right? So one of the reasons why I bring that up and sort of identifying that in myself is because he and I have talked about it so much. Because at times he's like, I can't understand why you're so happy all the time. And I'm like, well, but I have a strange thing, which to finish your question, I think he is someone who is driven by more. And then he gets to that hill and he's like, God damn it, there's another. I mean, I often talk about the freeze frame moment in life that I chased for a very long time, which is, the end of a movie or a sitcom where everyone's like, we did it. And they freeze. And then you stand there for like 8 seconds. You're like, oh God, I've got to go to work tomorrow. I've still got to do whatever. I've got to pay my tax bill. I've got to do this, that, and the other. And what I have learned in my life is that, it's the journey, not the destination, which is again, a well-worn observation. But in those moments in my life, and I have been incredibly fortunate to have achieved lots of things that I dreamt of at one stage and then have managed to make happen, or has happened to me, depending on your philosophy of it. But I've realized in those instances, like years ago, I won the like best newcomer at the Edinburgh Comedy Festival in 2011. I did like a one-man show, and that was something that for 10 years I've been going up to the Edinburgh Festival. Ironic that I was best newcomer 10 years in, but that's the way the rules worked at that stage. And it had been a thing I had wanted for 10 years, which at that stage was a third of my life or something like that. And I remember, they called my name and I went up and I felt great. And I celebrated with my producer and my director and we all had a drink. It was great. And then I had to literally go and do that show that night. And this is a phenomenon that comedians at the festival get all the time. That show always sucks. It's always horrible because everybody in the audience is like, oh, he won the award. He won, like, he's the top new guy. We did well to book this ticket 2 weeks ago, whatever it is. And then they sit there and like, oh, I think wasn't that funny? Was it? It was all right. I guess they give these out to anyone these days. And I had that immediate come down again of like, well, this doesn't really change the fact that I've still got to go out and perform. And then I've got to go back to London and try and sell a script to someone at the BBC and get paid a pittance for it and work my ass off and then be like, no, we're not going to make this. And they're like, okay, back to the drawing board. And, over time that reached that sort of, I think forged me into someone who was like, take pleasure in where you are now and what you're doing. I mean, my route into this, like a lot of comedians and performy type people, is desperation for affirmation, right? It was growing up in a household where a very happy childhood, but just not a lot of good job, well done, I love you. That just wasn't part of the sort of lexicon. And I think you become I became very reliant on outside sources of affirmation. And that remains a challenge for me. And it remains a challenge for me because I'm quite an emotionally stunted person. I often talk about this. I exist. This is part of the gift and the curse of the contentment, is that I live in an emotional zone between about a 3 and a 7. Everything that happens to me in my life takes place in that zone. If somebody dies that's close to me, I'm like, that's really sad, but I never go below a 3 in terms of my emotional response to it. If I win Best Newcomer or Wrexham get promoted, or any of these great moments, when I got married, like any of these things, I can't get beyond. My wife knows all this, by the way, so she's not going to be like, what?
Important caveat.
Yes, important caveat. So I've lived in this 3 to 7 zone, sort of grey zone in many respects. And I would say I spend more time at a 6 or a 7 than I do anywhere else on that spectrum. But it comes with the challenge of, you have these great moments. They don't last. I get a spike. Maybe I get up to an 8 or something like that. I'm just doing a lot of burping because of my tea. Sorry, listeners at home. And it creates it's a great armor. It's a great shell, protects you from the lows, but it also inures you from the highs.
Yeah.
And it's something that has, in many ways, stood me in very good stead. I've had therapy about it. I've been trying to break that thing. I'd like to get out the top and get out the bottom.
That zone that you described between a 3 and a 7 sounds to me like it's a survival strategy. At 100%. Some stage you've learned it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what has therapy uncovered on why you adopted that as an armor?
Well, so as I say, my family life growing up was very good in so many ways, but it was very traditional. Again, very sort of, my dad was the child of kind of very Edwardian grandparents. Like they were old-fashioned for their generation. Their parents were old-fashioned for their generation. My parents still old-fashioned for their generation. And I think they were just in a scenario like, you don't tell each other you love each other. Like, that's embarrassing. Sure. That's un-English, sort of sinister in some way. And you don't tell people, you don't tell each other we're proud of each other or anything like that. Like all that is a bit sort of, it's not the done thing. Like it was a real like stiff upper lip factory. And like I say, very happy, very spoiled, unbelievable privilege, in comparison to most people in society. They sent me to a very good school, very nice school. The cares and concerns that affect so many people growing up, I was protected from. But what I found was it was what was our kind of familial interpersonal language was mockery and jokes and fun and making fun of people. And that's what made me just draw in and create a shell. And like, I can think back to instances as a child where I put myself out there, as the kids say, and I made myself very vulnerable in a moment. Like, look, I've done this thing, isn't it brilliant? And getting like, no, it's rubbish back, and being like, okay, well, I'll pull that in because that was very painful. Don't want that to happen again. And yeah, I mean, you're exactly right, Tim. It's a defense mechanism, and what it does is, as I say, it allows me to coast through life and avoid a lot of the challenges and difficulties that come with life, or at least to compartmentalize them and sort of dispose of them into a sort of mental garbage disposal. But I recognize, I'm like, this isn't great. It's not good. I want to feel the feelings that I see reflected back to me by other people. I mean, a case in point was the night we got promoted for the National League with Wrexham. Spoiler alert for anyone who's not watched the documentary. But it was 4 years ago now. It was a huge outpouring of emotion. I mean, it was an extraordinary thing to experience because we'd had 15 years in non-league, and the sort of psychological trauma that had imbued so many of our fans, for whom the football club was a kind of a rare source of pride in the town, but it had been non-league. And meanwhile, Shrewsbury and Tranmere and all these, our local rivals, had all been having a great time in league football. That kind of explosion of joy afterwards, I was like, I'm not very good at processing this. Like, I turned around, my wife in floods of tears, and she kind of looked at me and she kissed me. She's like, you did it, well done. And I was like, thanks, and sort of shook her hand virtually. And she gets it, she understands. And I mean, as it happens, I was able to process. Like a few weeks later, we did an open top bus tour around the town. I did burst into tears, which for me was like, this is the first time I've cried in 5-6 years, you know.
And what was the reaction to people seeing that?
Well, everyone's lovely about it, of course. I mean, it's that crazy thing where our concerns and our you know, these neuroses, which is what this is, aren't logical. Like I can look at them and I can see them and I can identify them and put them on a plate in front of myself. But then as soon as I get up from that table, I'm like, oh, let's pop that back in deep in the heart and back into being weird about it.
You know, of all the things you've done at Wrexham, and we'll go into the details of those because it's deeply impressive, I think finding your own authenticity is probably the most important one of the lot, isn't it?
Yes, for me personally. Yeah. It's been huge for me in terms of my sense of self. And actually that contentment that I talk about, I think has only been enhanced in the last 4 years, because I think a big part of that desire to have an outside approval, it was a very ephemeral thing. You would do, as a performer, you do your show, people would hopefully really enjoy it, and then you go back to your hotel, you go back to your house, and you're like, all right, well, that's dissipated again. And being part of a long-term ongoing thing that is so beloved, but that also that we know improves people's lives in Wrexham and North Wales to such a huge degree, that's been, that is that. I talked about that kind of nuclear rod at the center of Rob. Like that is something that I've been able to put into myself and be like, yes, I'm doing it.
I understand now why you were so drawn to Rob. Can we move on to what happened when you decided to buy a football club? Because I think the process of choosing Wrexham is fascinating.
Yeah.
You had this like scoring system, didn't you?
Yes. Yeah. So I created a kind of matrix. I mean, again, at this stage, I am still in the mindset of like, well, this is a bit of fun. This is a fun thing to do. I don't know if this is ever going to come to fruition, but sure, I'll spend 2 days like digging through statistics on lower league football clubs and trying to put them into a sort of ranking system. And I think that the process, though I say to myself, was wildly successful in a way that I didn't necessarily, previously I've been like, well, how do you choose between, Carlisle United or Hartlepool United or Aldershot or Wrexham or Northampton Town or any of these like all these football clubs have wonderful histories and tapestries and communities built around them. How do you pick them out? And with the help of Wikipedia and Football Manager, that was as sophisticated as it got.
I love Wikipedia and Football Manager.
I know.
Got you to buy Wrexham Football Club.
I think that's the Venn diagram. Like where they agreed, I was like right in the middle. Yeah, but it was, I mean, that game series is an incredible database of information about places, about their training grounds, about their average attendances, all those sorts of things that Wikipedia, doesn't necessarily have. And there must be somewhere a more sophisticated database that you can access, but I've not discovered it in 4 years of working in professional football. So yeah, I think there were 5 categories. It was sort of fan base, geography, history, and then narrative was a big one. That's kind of the biggest one.
Go on, say more about that.
So narrative, we knew we were going to do a documentary from the jump. That was the idea. That was how we were going to make this work, was, running a football club is expensive and it's challenging, and we wanted to have a safety net as much as possible. So Rob, the day after he told me he'd spoken to Inner Circle Sports in New York, he was like, I went for a walk with John Landgraf, who's the head of FX, which is a kind of Fox subsidiary in the States. And I've sold him 2 seasons of this documentary. Which team are we buying? It's like, oh, well, okay. That means we know that, the scale of American television is so bananas that, I work on this show, Mythic, I think our production budget per episode is like $5 million, Welcome to Wrexham is not that, because it's not narrative television, so it's much cheaper. But you understand that, I mean, that's what it would cost to make 2 series of a BBC One sitcom, So the scale there is so vast that suddenly I was like, well, actually, we're going to have a war chest that's going to be unlike anything anyone in the lower leagues could possibly command. And, there's a debate around the sort of morality and philosophy of that, of like, are you, one of the things we talked about a lot. Initially, Rob wants to go to League of Ireland because he's Irish in tradition. I was like, look, if you drop you guys into the League of Ireland, it's like throwing a brick into a puddle. Like, it would just be so big. With all the due respect to League of Ireland, you would swamp, whoever we took over would beat everybody, hands down, every single game. It wouldn't be fun. It wouldn't be interesting. It wouldn't be compelling. We briefly talked about Scotland, but similarly, it was like, well, I think we would go so far. If we took over Arbroath or something like that, you would go up so quickly, the journey would be short and not that interesting. So we were very, very cognizant of the narrative and the storyline and how is this relevant? And the fact that Wrexham is a Welsh team, every single game is like a cross-border derby. You know, our fans hate everybody we play. Everybody we play hates us. It adds a bit of spice. It adds a little bit of something and a sense of identity and a sense of difference. And, you know, that was where Wrexham scored really, really highly. And the fact that it was the oldest, you know, third oldest professional team in the world, oldest continuous use international stadium, and that it had been kept alive by some unbelievably heroic actions of the fans who, you know, mortgaged houses, cars, all sorts of things just to keep the club afloat. But it was slowly dying. I mean, I think if we hadn't come in, I don't know if Wrexham, unless someone else had come in, I don't think Wrexham would still exist as a football club now. I mean, really, when we got into the weeds and started looking in the books and things, It was like, yeah, it's very hard. And COVID, of course, came along. Principal source of income for all those National League clubs is ticket sales. The government, you know, stepped in to help, but it was really hard. I mean, we had this huge stadium. You know, most National League clubs, 2,000-3,000 seat stadium. We had a 10,000 seat stadium, but we could only get 2,000 or 3,000 people in there. So it just becomes this big millstone. Slowly, it's decaying. But yes, now 4 years later, it's on the up and up. It's good.
Brilliant.
So when you made the decision, then
Yeah.
you've gone through your 5-point criteria.
Yeah.
You've decided that Wrexham's the team. Tell us about the conversations back in the States about taking this abstract concept to making it a reality.
Yeah, well, I think, again, Rob's leadership style is, you know, he's like a sort of Viking berserker where he charges the line of shield men in front, like makes a hole, and then the idea is everybody else pours through that hole and sort of does things. And so, you know, I was like, is he like Napoleon? No, he has a Napoleon complex, but Napoleon was very intricate about logistics and things. Rob, no interest in the intricacy. He's I'll go through the wall first. I'll jump, you know, I'll smash through the wall. I'll be the first guy off the deck of the ship onto the other ship, just like laying around me with a big hammer. And then everybody else get on and you do the more complicated stuff. And I didn't know what I was doing at all. But we were very fortunate because we had first Inner Circle Sports who you know had done a lot of these deals for different clubs for kind of American investors. And then we had Sean Harvey who came to join us, who was he'd been CEO at Bradford and Leeds, and then he was chairman of the EFL for 6 years or something like that. I've done 26 years in football. And I'll be honest, he came with a bit of a reputation. I was a bit like, well, I know he's quite a controversial figure in UK football because of this, that, and the other. But then realized very quickly, I was like, this guy, you know, has forgotten more about football than I'll ever know. His instincts are incredible, and his understanding of what really matters to get you to where you need to be is very, very strong. And I realized that, you know, reputations, there's two sides to every story. And as I got to know, I was like, oh, I think this is somebody who's been slightly ill-used by the sort of the public in terms of their perception of him. And very quickly, we were like, this sort of seems to be working quite well. I mean, it took us a minute to get, I think it was November when Rob and Ryan were announced as the potential takeover guys. And because of COVID, you know, some of the regulatory stuff we had to do with the government just took such a long time because they were like, well, half the workforce has been furloughed and sent home. And so it wasn't until February the 9th, I think it was, 2021. I mean, we'd started this conversation in March of 2020, and then we took over in February 21.
And what did Ryan bring to the table when he got involved? Because it sounds like Rob is an energy source. Rob's an optimist. Rob gets things done. Yeah. You're then the man on the ground. What was the requirement for Ryan?
Well, what Ryan proved to be was a massive sort of force multiplier. I'm using lots of military terms today, enjoying it. But he you know, Rob had thought to himself, you know, again, a lot of football, all this was so new to him. And he was like, wait, so they've got like sponsors on their shirts, because, you know, in NFL, NBA, they don't have those yet. I mean, I think they now, weirdly, in the NBA, they have like a little patch up here on the shoulder. But he's like, oh yeah, so we should get a sponsor. Like, who should we get to sponsor this? And then again, went away. 2 days later, I got a text message being like, hey, so I thought about this. You know, Ryan Reynolds has got this gin company, Aviation Gin. He's very into like interesting, quirky marketing. So I messaged him because they followed each other on Instagram, but didn't know each other.
I assumed they were like best buddies. That had a great
they didn't know each
together.
other. They'd exchanged one message. Ryan had sent Rob a message on Instagram being like, hey, I saw this episode of It's Always Sunny. It was amazing. It's one of the best pieces of television I've ever seen. You know, great job. And Rob was like, oh, wow, thanks, man. I like your movies. And he's like, thanks. And that was 2 years previous or something. And then, Rob messaged Ryan said, I'm doing this thing. It's kind of crazy. I'm going to take over this 5th tier soccer team in the UK. And would you like to be a sponsor? And Ryan, he sent that like late at night, went to bed. Ryan's on the East Coast, he's on the West Coast. So when he woke up, the text message back was just like, call me. Here's my number. And so he rang him. And Ryan was basically like, I don't want to sponsor your team. I want to go in halves with you. This sounds amazing. To be fair, Rob from the jump, what he connected with was watching Sunderland Till I Die, how much it meant to the people of Sunderland. And he says he saw a lot of himself and like Philadelphia in those people. He's like, there's a connection here. And so I think when he messaged Ryan, he's like, look, I want to do this thing. It's like a philanthropic engine. It's not, I don't know that we'll make any money doing this necessarily, but we will do something really fun and really awesome. And the analogy that we've bandied around a few times is like, when you are a rich person, you can buy a yacht and keep it in Cannes and go on it, twice a year for 2 weeks, 2 weeks in the winter and 2 weeks in the summer or something. But when you launch your yacht off the dock in Cannes, you don't get 10,000 people cheering, roaring, crying, experiencing this like collective ecstasy. And so I think that Rob kind of started to me, was like, look, we're in this situation, like we can do fun, weird projects. What about a fun, weird project that's also a philanthropic engine that changes the fortunes of this town? So one of the things that was part of my narrative column on that thing was I would go in and look for like socio-economic data on the areas. So one of the teams that we talked about briefly was Macclesfield Town, who were going through a very tough time. They've sort of been reborn under Robbie Savage recently, but they were going through a very tough time. And to be honest, I was like, well, Macclesfield's a very nice area just outside Manchester. It seems like it's a bit of a commuter belt for people that are working in Manchester. They've got lots of good things going for them in that town. This is a town that doesn't necessarily feel like it has that. So I think when Rob explained all this to Ryan, he was like, yeah, I want to do that. I mean, he loves doing philanthropic-y things. Him and Blake, they do loads of things in Canada and this, that, and the other. And it was just kind of an expansion of that part of his life, I think.
So can I ask you about the dynamic of the three of you then? Because you're making it happen. I was like Jake, I assumed there was a deeper, longer relationship there with the three of them. How does it work then? And how have you worked on it to make sure you are effective together?
Well, I think it's grown and evolved over 3-4 years, definitely. And the single biggest thing has been we've slowly expanded the operation. There are now more people kind of involved on a day-to-day basis at Wrexham, both operationally in the building and then strategically at kind of board level as well. But I think the glue that got us going was, and I said at the beginning, was passion. It was enthusiasm. It was a real desire to have a goal that was something more than just like, oh, can we make a success of it, financial success of this? And I think what they liked about me and my approach to it was that I really cared. I mean, I love football and I love football clubs. And I as you can tell by my thick Toxteth accent, I'm a Liverpool fan by day, but it doesn't matter what the football team is. I kind of love them all. Like I love what they are to their communities, what the glue they are to where they're from, and I take huge pleasure from going to all our away games, going and seeing like, oh, we're going to Exeter on Saturday. Like, I haven't been there yet. I want to go and see their stadium and see their setup and see how it all works. And that was shared by them. Like they are sort of passionate people. They are both passionate and driven. They want to do things. They're interested in things. They take, truly as much pleasure. If we, sign a big sponsorship deal or whatever, they're like, oh, that's great. That's going to set us up for the next season or whatever it may be. But then they're just as excited when we do things like, we've signed a partnership with a social enterprise football club in Lesotho called Kick for Life. And we sent a bunch of coaches down there. We brought a bunch of their coaches up to us and that kind of stuff. They're just like, this is great. Like I can't believe we're getting to affect these people's lives in this beneficial way across all these different areas. So, yeah.
Well, it reminds me of a quote we spoke to an entrepreneur called Susie Ma, who set up Tropic Skincare. And she had this lovely line where she said, lots of people have passion, but it's when you can align it with a sense of purpose.
Yeah.
It seems to be almost become rocket fuel.
Yeah.
And you've spoken about this purpose of the socioeconomic, the philanthropic elements of it. How have you kept that at the heart of over the last 4 years so that hasn't been diluted?
It's been a challenge because actually, in some way, trying to trammel all this energy and enthusiasm, as you say, into like focused lanes can be quite difficult at times because there's so much we could do and can do, but there's only so many hours in the day. So like one of the areas that a decision we made early on, which I think was the correct decision still, was we put a lot of our time and energy into the first team, men's first team. It's like, right, we need to make sure that we've got the best coach, the best possible players, get promoted as quickly as possible, because that really is the number one thing that people in Wrexham want. They want to see their team win on a Saturday and get promoted. But it meant that our infrastructure behind the scenes was still is not what it should be really for a League One club. And our community foundation and our CSR provision was not as good as it should be. And actually on the documentary, we talk a lot about being a community club and this and that. And we are, and we're very close. And, I was talking to Ben Foster the other day, who was very briefly Wrexham goalkeeper and then came out of retirement to play for us again in our championship winning season in the National League. And he was saying how special it is that at Wrexham still our players, they drive in, they park in the university car park and they walk through the club car park to go into the stadium every day for training and on match days. And so our fans interface with them the whole time. Like they know, they have relationships with our fans. They have like friendships. There are like strange rituals that some of our, like we have the people that are always there. And like Millie Tipping, who's one of our fans who people might know from the documentary, she always holds Jack Marriott's Starbucks cup while he signs everybody. So that's my role. And that proximity between fans and players is so important. That's something that I think we really need to keep at the very heart of what we do, because for anyone who's watched the documentary, that's a huge part of the charm. I think it'd be suddenly, if you're watching the documentary and we're like, you see footage of the players getting into their bus at the training ground, they drive under the stadium and they all leave with their Beats by Dre headphones on. It's lost some of the magic of what makes it so special there.
Here's the truth, okay? High performers don't do more. They just work smarter. It's a myth I want to debunk, that high performance means chasing hacks, squeezing it in, working harder than everybody else. It's not true. The best performers just simplify. They master the fundamentals. We call it world-class basics on high performance. And in many ways, I've learned this through trial and error, but also through the conversations that we've had on this show. And one area you need to get the basics right is your nutrition. And that's where Vitals comes in. This is nutrition without the noise. 2 capsules, 6 seconds, 0 effort. And this has all the essential nutrients, vitamins, minerals, and healthy fats that you need, designed to power your sleep, your energy, your focus, your recovery. No mixing, no messing, no nonsense. Everything you need in the right dose. So why don't you strip your health routine back and just focus on what matters? Head to Heights.com/Jake or enter the code HP20 at checkout for 20% off your first order. Can we talk about Ryan Reynolds' approach to working with you and doing business in this partnership? Because he's lauded now as this kind of master of PR and marketing, and he's got all these amazing businesses. You've seen firsthand what he's done with Wrexham, and I guess you now know what he does with his other businesses.
Yeah.
What are the big things you've learned from Ryan?
I think I would say he knows when to trust people. I think both him and Rob are very good at that. Like, example on the football side with us is just that they have never once sought to interfere with signing of players or matchday tactics. And we know in football it is replete with people who come in and they're like, look, I made tens of millions of pounds making like rubber nipples for like baby bottles. And the same thing applies. It's just another business, and this person's underperforming. So I'm going to dress them down and I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. And I'm going to overrule my manager, my line manager, the head coach, the manager, whatever it is, and be like, I'm going to the dressing room and I'm telling them they've got to sort their shit out or whatever it may be. And they have always been very good at going like, right, well, we're staying away, but then knowing when to deploy themselves in a useful way. So, Ryan's other business that's been incredibly successful is his marketing business, basically, Maximum Effort, which is his company there. He has a string of trusted lieutenants there. But then at a key juncture, they sort of know, they're almost like press the Ryan button, and a signal goes up in the sky and he comes in and will bring simultaneously both himself as an entity, which is very valuable. He's a face and he's, on Armani campaigns, he's this, that, and the other. There is a monetary value to him, the person. But actually, more importantly, is that I think he comes in and just puts a little twist on the end of whatever it is they're doing and brings it up a notch.
Yeah.
So they do these, like Match.com commercials, or they do, whatever it may be. And he's very creative, very versatile, very able to, he has a marketer's mind, I think. And I admire the trust they place, both of them, but Ryan in particular, because that was what the question was about, in the way that he trusts his lieutenants, but knows when, but isn't like, I'm checked out, you guys do whatever you want, and we'll see what happens.
And I am really fascinated by him because I just love the fact that you can exist in the world that he's existed in, had that career, and then also go and do this amazing business stuff.
Yeah.
What are the questions that he asks to make things more creative, to have more of an impact, to come up with concepts that actually do translate right across the world?
It sounds kind of asinine as an answer, but I think it's a thing you hear a lot in comedy writers' rooms, and he's a very creative person across a number of genres, but comedy is really his wellspring of his success. And that is like, can we beat this? Like, it's not being satisfied until they have a very loose, when we do, so, we shot a commercial for Stoke Cold Brew Coffee at the stadium in time for the Super Bowl this year. So they're one of our sponsors. And we shot a little video with Channing Tatum there. And Ryan was around for that, I believe. And she wasn't in the building that day. I was in the US. But, it's someone who like just comes in and is like willing to throw away what they have decided they're going to do for the sake of what's funniest in the here and now. And I think that flexibility and that willingness to kind of run and gun is it's a thing that's very common creatively in the States. Again, they have talked about those huge budgets you get on American TV shows. That gives you the flexibility to be like, well, I know this is a script and this is what everyone's learned, but I don't think this scene really works. So everybody just improvise a scene and we'll see what comes out of it. And I think that has taught him and Rob, it's Always Sunny in Philadelphia is about 80% improvised. They write like 16, 15 page scripts and then just make up the rest of the show as they go along. And I think that has helped them both to have that flexibility, that improvisational skill to be like, this isn't quite working. What if we try this? What if we try this? What if we try this? That's the one.
It's so interesting because I have a production business called The Whisper Group, and we make Formula One coverage for Channel 4 here in the UK. And a few years ago, we convinced Tom Cruise to do a Top Gear style opener for us, right? First of all, he was on the phone to the production team, Tom Cruise himself, discussing the ideas for an opener for a British TV show, which no one expected. Then on the day of the shoot at Silverstone, he turns up in his helicopter, and the first thing he says, don't tell anyone I flew my own helicopter, it's against my insurance policy, because he was making a film at the time, they didn't want him. And then he sat in the room with like our producer and our presenters and just went, let's just work out how to make this more fun. And did exactly what you're describing there. That kind of on the fly, improve it as we go, improvise, and also, but I think also looking for those little marginal gains.
Yes, those tiny gains.
Yeah,
absolutely. I think that sounds exactly familiar to my experience with Ryan when we've done these little kind of, it's been an incredible resource for the club to have them and their kind of creative teams produce content around the little, the video to announce who they were when they were trying to do the takeover or whatever it may be. Like these things have gone everywhere and got huge number of impressions and things like that it's massive for the success of the club. There's a kind of delineation. I'm very much on the club side of business, and there are certain kind of boundaries I get up to and like, right, beyond that, that's nothing to do with me. That's all you guys. But there's obviously a huge crossover, and we see time and again that it's like, okay, this is a concept, we're going to do this kind of video. So all right, that sounds funny and good. And then the finished article, you're like, well, that's way better. And it's like, we sort of messed around with it on the day and found something that just was magic.
On the club side, we were talking beforehand about actually how involved are they in running Wrexham Football Club? Like, are they involved in having the final say on whether a manager buys a player? Do they have to green light a salary? Do they make a sort of a daily decision, or when you have your catch-ups over video conferencing? How involved are they?
So I mean, what we've done is basically, as time has gone on, all four of us, and I would include Sean Harvey in this, have become, we've moved sort of steadily more into like a corporate setting in a way. I mean, one of my particular purview these days is community and the community foundation. So I work particularly closely with them. But for Rob and Ryan, I mean, things will get kicked up to board level, and then the decision is like, are we gonna spend £2 million on Sam Smith, the player we signed in January? That final decision, we need to get an okay off them, because that was beyond the budget that we'd set at the beginning of the season.
Right.
Feeling was, look, we're really close to getting promoted out of League One. Should we break our budget a little bit just to see if we can get someone in who can score? If he scores another 7 goals between now and the end of the season, he'll be worth 3-4 times what we pay for him. So it's a calculated gamble. But they as I said, they're good about, sometimes it'll come the other way where they're like, hey, we want to do this. And we're like, oh, okay, where's this come from? It's like, well, I read something and I want us to see if we can we do something about that? Sure, of course we can facilitate that.
That's usually also valuable as well, that it gets you to look at things you wouldn't normally think about.
Of course, 100%. And I mean, the biggest thing is that just, they both love it. They love coming to the games. They love being there. And I go back to my boat analogy. It's like, you don't get, like, the pleasure that they get out of seeing what it does for everyone is so great that they, I think, like Ryan jokes sometimes being like, oh, I can't believe you like got me into this to Rob. But he loves it. They all love it because it's, especially, Ryan's been having a strange year with everything that's been going on around his like other world. And I think he likes coming to Wrexham because it's just like, this is a place where everyone's like, no, I don't care about any of that. We just care about whether, we can score one more goal than Wigan Athletic.
It's probably good for him as well, right? To have some form of distraction, and
I think it's an escape for both of them. Yeah. Because it's a world where, it's a nice break from Hollywood and Hollywooding. And I mean, I found that as well. And actually, as I've gone back the other way, I'm like, oh, it's quite nice to go back. It's nice to get a break from wherever you are. Yeah. It's quite nice to go to where the grass is greener for now. And then you get the other side of the fence. Like, let's go back to Wrexham.
And I love the idea of them bringing stuff from their world of Hollywood or from entertainment into Wrexham. What have they learned from Wrexham that they've taken back into Hollywood?
Oh, goodness. I mean, that's a good question. I think that there's I think one of the biggest things they take away is that sort of, I don't know, almost the seriousness and import of what we're doing. I'll say, I mean, I can answer for myself more easily, obviously, than I can for them. But I know that it was particularly for Rob, I think this is the case, that I found, I worked as a comedian. I still work as a sort of comedian and writer these days, but done that for 20-something years now. And every now and then you would have a lovely thing where someone might come up to me and be like, oh, hey, I was quite ill last year and I was stuck in hospital, and I would just listen to like this old Radio 4 show that you and your friends made. And they'd be like, oh, that's lovely. What a lovely thing to hear. Thank you so much. Like, no, thank you, and you sort of shake hands and disappear. With Wrexham, it is I'm constantly being reminded, sort of accosted by people in M&S in Wrexham being like, I met my wife at the racecourse in 1975, and when she died, I couldn't go anymore because it was too hard, and I was watching this team that I loved was like circling the drain. It all went away, and now I've got a season ticket again. I go with my grandchildren. It's like, it's completely reinvigorated a part of my life that I thought I'd lost forever. And that's unbelievably powerful and nourishing for the soul. And I know, they both get that a lot. I think Ryan is someone who's, through his kind of philanthropic work previously, has had encounters of that ilk. He does lots of stuff with like sick kids in Canada, and I think has seen the difference that he's made. But I think for Rob and for myself, and even for Sean, who's someone who, again, as I say, has had like a fractious relationship with football sometimes in the past, I see with him sometimes he's a bit like, sort of shocked because someone will come up and be in tears and be like, thank you so much, whatever. And he's like, I'm really sort of used to this, And yeah, that is something that's the single best thing to take out of it. I mean, I don't know what I would say in terms of a takeaway to doing your own business other than be nice to people. It's really nice. They're nice back.
But actually, that sounds like a throwaway remark, but I actually think that lies at the heart of when we look at other clubs. I'm a Manchester United fan. We have American owners that have almost done it the polar opposite. They don't communicate. They're slashing community
Yeah.
funded projects. Why do you think so many other clubs get it wrong where you have got it so right?
Listen, I think we have a bit of a cheat code, right? So I have to be, rather than lecturing other football clubs, I have to acknowledge that up front, which is that because of Rob and Ryan, because of the documentary, the interest around what we do, we command a level of sponsorship money that, is unthinkable at our level and at the level. So you even have, in our division, we have Birmingham, very, very rich. They have very, very rich owners. But I imagine we make more money than they do from sponsorship deals. Like, they have more money than we do, no question. And they've spent it well, and they're going to be promoted from League One, no problem. But we have the ability to go, well, actually, we will support our women's team really hard, and we will put money into our community, our youth programs, because I think all football clubs would like to do that. I think Manchester United would like to do that. But the problem is they've spent an awful lot of money on a lot of very okay footballers for about 15 years. And I think this even more difficult is their infrastructure set up behind the scenes, where they're not creating a good sort of, and this, I hope, by all means, people from Manchester United be like, who's this jerk? And he doesn't know anything. But they, when you look at the success, like Liverpool are having this season, you can see the behind the scenes structure there is pretty good, because they've transitioned from one sort of generational coach who, didn't win as much as he probably should have done or could have done, but completely revitalized and rebuilt the club sort of from the ground up. They've gone into another guy, and it's just been a very smooth transition. This is totally off the topic of what you asked me. But I mean, my point being, I'm sympathetic to football clubs that are struggling. Like I saw, Huddersfield Town, who are in our division, they put their ticket prices up at the end of the season. They're like, next season it's going to cost more money, and they're going through quite a difficult time on the pitch. They're in and around the playoffs, but they're not playing terribly well. And fans are very upset, because they're like, who likes seeing prices go up? But then you look at their tickets, and like, well, their tickets are very cheap right now. They're very, very cheap. So it's easy for us. Like, we have done a bit of, like, we've frozen our ticket prices, and we've done this, and we've done that, and our fans are very grateful for it. But we can offset that against, we have United Airlines on the front of our shirts. We have HP on our sleeves. And so I think that, all to say that, like, we do have an advantage that other clubs don't, and they've got to cut their cloth, and football's getting more and more expensive. And again, in our division, League One this season, you had, like, Jay Stansfield went 15 million quid to Birmingham. We spent 2 million on Sam Smith. Huddersfield spent 2 million or something on Joe Taylor, and another 2 million. Those are huge sums for League One. Normally it'd be like, whoa, someone spent 450 grand on a striker. Like, that's nuts. Well, it's trickling down, and the numbers are crazy. And if you're at a club like Aldershot Town, or even, who's in our division, Cambridge United, it's like, this is really hard for them to do all those things. And yet, so many of those clubs do amazing work in their communities, and they won't sacrifice those things. And it's so important, because you're creating the next generation of fans. Football clubs should be about more than just what happens, from 3 p.m. to 5 p.m. on a Saturday.
And can you understand the frustration of a team like Cambridge United, that you guys kind of roll in, the big numbers, the big sponsors, the big opportunity, the promotions come. It's hard for those teams, isn't it, that are there continuing to sort of scrap away, and it isn't a level playing field. How do you respond to that?
Well, I mean, what I would say is, I see often people in general have been very good about it, I would say. When I go away, I remember I always pick Mansfield, going away to Mansfield Town last season. At that stage, I was still nervously smoking a lot of cigarettes on a match day. I've since given up, like a real hero. Going out at half time and being like, oh my, like 10 Mansfield fans just swarming towards me because they spotted me. And then they were so nice. They were like, oh, great, well done, congratulations. Like, obviously we want you guys to lose today, but like, documentary's good. Like, I think a lot of people in the trenches in League Two, League One are like, look, I'd quite like it to have happened to our club, and grudgingly go like, well, they are spending money on, they're not just, because the thing is, it's not like, we aren't set up in a way that Rob and Ryan are just going like, right, bang, here's 10 million quid for this guy, here's 5 million quid for this guy. We're only spending what we make. And we're operating at a slight loss because that's the way football is.
They're also not doing what the Glazers are doing, which is taking huge sums of money out of a football club and saddling the club with the big debt.
Big debt, yes, yeah. So it's but part of me, like that old 4 or 5 year old part of me that is a rules man and a rules follower and this, that, and the other is like, kind of wish we'd done it by just finding all these lower league gems and building a team and doing this, that, and the other so as to not be accused of doing X, Y, and Z. But then I look at what it's done for Wrexham, I look at what it's done for North Wales, like for the town, for the economy of the town. I'm like, yeah, if, you know, our record over the last few years has been, we got promoted, we finished second, God willing, we'll finish second this season. We're not steamrolling every team. You know, this season we've lost 7 games, we've won. So I think we may be at or about to hit the record for 1-0 wins in League One. We're not like, we're not Manchester City where we're absolutely crushing everybody in our division. It's no fun. Like, we fight like dogs every single game. I mean, if you watch, anybody who's watched League One a lot this season will be like, there's one thing about this Wrexham team. We fight tooth and nail for every single point. And actually, you know, some elements of our fan base are like, this is boring. And, you know, like we want to stuff a few people and like play some tiki-taka. But actually, I kind of have fallen in love with the fact that we're just a miserable, grinding pack of bastards.
Let's talk then about how you've created that culture with those players. I remember seeing on day one, you walked in, you were introduced to a bunch of lower league football players. And someone went, here's Humphrey Ker, who's going to be running the club on behalf of Rob and Ryan. And the faces on those players, if no one's seen it, please go watch it. Arms folded, sitting back in the chair.
Yeah.
And I kind of thought to myself, there would have been players thinking, hold on, this is my career. I have to pay my mortgage. I have to feed my children. This is a really serious shit for me.
100%.
Don't come in here with your Hollywood mega stars and your guy who's going to have this as like a plaything and have a bit of fun with my life.
Yeah.
Was there a sense of that?
So I always got a very good welcome off the player. I mean, that moment is, yes, you left out very kindly the fact that I leant on a light switch and actually switched off the lights in the room. It's like a bit out of a sitcom. And I was like, truly, and I mean, that's me like, oh, sorry. Oh gosh, I'm so sorry. Sorry, everybody. I'm here, you know, they were, I mean, truly looking, the reverse shot of that was like, it was like a nightmare.
How it was
like being back in school and being like, oh, I've got to stand in front of all the coolest kids in school and be like, hi, I'm in charge of you now, you know. But actually, they were very, very welcoming. That period was difficult because we knew that we were going to probably want to make a change. You know, Dean Keats, who was the manager at that stage, and those players, you know, they did a fantastic job. They ended up finishing 8th in that first half season we were in charge. And but ultimately, I think there was a collective feeling of like, you know, amongst the fan base, amongst us, everyone was like, I think we need to sort of refresh and begin again and start over. And
how did you work out that was the right thing to do?
Well, our policy was like, well, if he gets in the playoffs with this team who have a tiny budget, like we should keep him around. Yeah. But there were a couple of things that like, you know, over the course of those 3 or 4 months where, you know, you just start being like, that's not an ideal, it's not a great sign in terms of sort of what would happen with more resources or whatever going forward.
Could you give us an example?
Well, I mean, we had a thing on like, we had this crazy transfer deadline day where this is actually before the takeover had gone through, but Rob and Ryan said, look, we'll back you guys. We'll give the club money to spend this January transfer window. And if we don't take over, it's yours. Don't worry. We won't ask for it back. We'll give you like a chunk of change. If the takeover falls through, we're not going to come, you know, we signed a thing. This is as a gift. See who you can get. And we just had this kind of nuts day where we would the team was driving down to Eastleigh on the day, and one of our striker, the one striker who had sort of scored a few goals that season, got an offer from Chesterfield, I think it was, and like got off the bus at Oxford Services, and we were like, no, we're not selling you. And he's like, no, I'm coming off the bus, you know. And the manager was like, oh, let him go, it's fine, you know, we'll get somebody else in, and we then were having these kind of back and forth phone calls, and we've been looking for a central midfielder, and we've been looking at a player called Tom East from Reading, and then the manager called up and was like, oh, there's a player at Bolton called Tom West, and we were like, okay, it's funny, East West, you know. Go through to Bolton, like, there's not a player on here called Tom West. You know, they don't have a player called Tom West. Is it Tom White? Like, is it Tom White he's talking about? Oh yeah, Tom White. And I was a bit like, it doesn't seem ideal to me. You don't really know the name of the player that you're looking to sign on deadline day. And I mean, I think, listen, in his defense, he'd be like, well, I gave a list of players, and we had an outside scout who was looking at them, who was like, you know, I'm not sure about these. And, you know, it was just a world in which it felt as though, I mean, the fans had really taken again him sort of before we even came on the scene, because it was, the team was struggling. And again, not really his fault. I mean, I actually think he did a very good job as a manager under very difficult circumstances. But there was just like the tide of sort of history was slightly like, there's an enthusiasm, there's a desire, and we went out and got Phil Parkinson.
And the truth is, you do have to be ruthless, right? As well,
yes, which is not really
philanthropic and encouraging.
Yeah.
So how did you deal with those moments personally?
Were
you in the room when you let that manager go?
Actually, I think Sean was the person who
right, you passed that job over.
No, I did. He was he was like, oh, I've got it.
Relief.
I was like, okay. But I don't think Dean has many happy memories of me, unfortunately. But I understand because you put your finger on it earlier. The club at that stage is like a subsistence football operation. Everybody there this is their paycheck. They haven't got any savings. They're not coasting off like, oh well, I had 3 seasons at Manchester City where I banked a load of cash and now I've fallen down the table. They were like, as soon as I finish playing, I'm going to go work at B&Q or become a plasterer or become whatever these things may be. And so I totally would understand any amount of suspicion or reluctance on their part, but actually they were very welcoming and very friendly. And I was struck by how sanguine almost all of them were in terms of being like, look, this is how it goes. I'll go play for Dover now, or I'll go do this. Yeah, but people in the lower level, you stick a club for 1, 2, 3 seasons, you go somewhere else. It really is a kind of, people were pretty calm about it. And it's been a real challenge for us is as we've gone up the leagues, people who have been absolutely central mainstays that are fan favorites and heroes and captains of the club and stuff. And it's like, the manager reaches the point where he's like, I actually think it's time for them to move on. We've got to bring someone in because the standard is getting higher and higher. And Phil has often had a policy for like, I want this player for right now.
Yeah.
I'll sign this 33-year-old who is exactly what we need right now, but knowing we're going to put him on a 1.5 year contract. And at the end of it, some of them we've got these sort of evergreen players like James McLean and Stephen Fletcher who just will not retire. They're like the sort of ancient men or Jurassic Mark Howard, as he's known, who's 38 or something like that. But they're brilliant. I mean, those guys, you immediately see the value of them. They're great players. I mean, Jimmy has started almost all our games this season. Fletch comes off the bench and I think he's our top scorer this year. But they're, ex-internationals, ex-Premier League players. The standards they set, and you see how it rubs off on the younger players is brilliant.
Can we talk to you about Phil Parkinson? Because I think he's a unsung hero in this story. I'm interested in how transparent you were with him when he came in, because I can imagine there's a lot of coaches, the idea of being filmed, delivering team talks in the dressing room, they regard that as a sacrosanct place.
He was definitely reluctant. And I think a big thing was Rob persuading him, like, look, this is our documentary. Sunderland Till I Die, for example, is a documentary independent of the club. So you're only going to see the public's only going to see what we want to show them to a certain extent. And that's going to protect you from the worst vagaries of like, if something goes badly wrong, you're not going to get dragged through the mud or treated like garbage. And when it became apparent that Phil was available, we were all, I was excited because I was like, wait, hang on. Well, first of all, Phil played in the first professional game I ever went to see at Reading, Elm Park, Reading versus Watford, Reading 4, Watford 1. And Phil was in midfield for Reading, which I told him on the phone the first time we spoke. And he's like, oh, God, I feel really old now. So, sorry. Yes, maybe that was a bad choice to tell you that. But, knowing his track record, having promotions and avoiding relegations with Bradford and Bolton and Colchester and all these different places, I was like, really? Phil Parkinson's available and interested? At the time, I think they were inquiring about him for the West Bromwich Albion job. And so we persuaded him. That was probably an area where, again, the financial clout of being able to be like, look, we can offer you the kind of contract, nothing crazy, of course, but what we can do is give you a rolling contract. So you're always 1 year out from the end of your contract. And that gives him a degree of security that, again, in lower league football in all football is hard to get, And far and away, he's been the best decision we made. We've signed some great players. We've, made some good decisions around the fan experience and all that kind of stuff. But Phil is the one who I think has created a culture at the club that we're all really proud of.
How's he done that?
I think, he has a no plonkers test. So him.
I like this. Go on.
Well, I think his philosophy is like a strong. I think his big thing is like strong teams beat strong individuals. So he has always. We've had a few opportunities where we've been like, oh, this player's available. Like, that's crazy. He's amazing. Like, that guy's got 17 goals from midfield in League One last season. And then Phil comes back and is like, no, I've asked around, I've got a big network, and a few people are like, he's a dick. He's not a good guy to work with. And time and again, as we bring in more players, I've been in the States for a while. I just got back. So I just met all our January signings who've been there for about 5-6 weeks now. And I'm always like, how are you finding it? How are you settling in? They're like, this is great. Everyone told me. They all know each other as well. That's the other thing is everyone's like, oh, I played with so-and-so here. But they're like, I've been hearing from, Andy, Ryan Longman, who signed for us from Hull. He played with Andy Cannon at Hull a few years ago, and they're friends and still in touch. And he'd be like, oh, I've been messaging Andy. And then out of the blue, my agent's like, oh, Wrexham are interested. And so I messaged Andy and he was like, drop everything. Like, don't take a pay cut, do whatever, come here. You'll have such a good time. And he's like, and it's great, it's fun, it's nice. Like they get on incredibly well. And Phil, I think, has managed the personalities and the egos. And the anecdote that I've been trotting out a lot recently is at Christmas, my friend Phil Breen came to the game with me, and we drove up from London because it was right after Christmas. So we went up together, and I went in through the players' entrance to kind of cut through into the stadium and then cut up to where we were sitting, and saw a lot of the players who I hadn't seen in about 3 or 4 weeks. So everyone's stopping, hi Humphrey, how are you? Chat. And every single one of them, whether it was James McLean, who's 38, 103 caps for Ireland, or like Harry Ashfield, who's 20, who's just signed his first professional contract with us, they like queued up after me to be like, hello, my name's James McLean. Hello, my name's Harry Ashfield. Hello, my name's Elliot Lee. Hello, my name's Arthur Okonkwo, like whatever it may be, like sort of polite schoolboys. And I was like, that speaks so well to like the culture here that at some point Phil has been like, if you see someone you don't know in here, introduce yourself, look them in the eye, shake their hand. Like that's how we kind of conduct ourselves. And I think it speaks to like the culture in there is so good. And there are challenges always, of course, because you have players who want to play, who can't play. And managing that is difficult.
Do you get involved in that?
I don't. I mean, I get on very well with lots of the players, and some, particularly the older ones, because we're around the same age, and they will get my jokes about the original Gladiators series, which the new ones are all like Fury. I'm like, no, Wolf, idiots. But the when it comes to kind of stuff like that, I'm very careful. Like I won't go in the dressing room before a game, like on a Saturday. Like I'm like, that's not my place. Some Rob and Ryan, they ask Phil's permission to go into the dressing room, and they do very rarely when they come over. But afterwards, we'll go in and see everybody. But I'm very careful not to get into a position where I'm like, they don't get what they want from dad, so they're coming to mum, kind of thing. I'm not playing, or I'm not doing this, and I'm like, I do not pick the team.
How have you also managed to create a culture that sounds warm and inclusive and positive and empathetic and maybe a bit vulnerable at times if everyone's sort of being open with each other? But at the same time, you've had to create a winning culture where every single one of the players at Wrexham has got a target on their back. Yeah. Every team that plays Wrexham, it's their cup final. Yeah. Right? How has that culture been created, and what have you learned from that?
I think it's helped that everywhere we go, everybody wants to beat us. We know that we cannot turn up and just, time and again, as we went through the National League, you have those situations where we go 2 or 3-0 up, and you'd see the opposition team running through brick walls, trying to get one back, trying to get back into the game and trying to fight us to the death. And then the following week, you watch them play one of our rivals, and they go 2-0 down. You see them just be like, okay, whatever, like who cares? And that's probably every team feels like that when they watch their team, that everybody wants to beat them. But I really do think there was a big thing. I mean, last season, this season, all our away games would be like, and it's the biggest attendance of the season. Thanks very much for coming out. And it's like, right, because everybody's come hoping to see us get smashed, and then they can see it on the documentary and be like, I was there when, Ryan Reynolds burst into tears or whatever it may be. But I think what it is like, my take on it is that he has forged a real kind of a brotherhood. They fight for each other. They love each other. There's no cliques. There's no like, oh, we sit on this table, or like this group are always here. I mean, you have car schools and things where it's like, oh, the Manchester lads all drive down together, or the guys in Liverpool all drive down together. But it's a very, I really noticed it when we did some of our pre-season touring and when we were in LA, and I was at the hotel with everybody and seeing the groups that were going off together, like, oh, we're going to go and see the Walk of Fame. And I'd be like, what a strange combination of guys that is, again, sort of Stephen Fletcher, Harry Ashfield, Arthur Okonkwo, like just players that
mix of ages and
experiences. Yes, because you've got like the guys that played in the Premier League, or the guys that came up through Premier League academies. You've got the guys who were started out at Wrexham, who've never had that kind of academy experience, and they just all seem to like muddle along very well. And it's sort of, they have their fines and they have their penalties for being late for training and all that kind of stuff. But mostly they just seem to have a good time.
I think the other area where you've done really well is the loyalty you've shown to the manager as well. Admittedly, the results have been good, which has been helpful.
Yes.
But not far from you in Salford.
Yeah.
You've got a similarly owned football club owned by some very well-known people who seem to chop and change their manager every 5 minutes. I wonder whether there's a little rivalry between these two clubs.
A little bit. I mean, we've had. I remember them coming last season and being, they're being friendly enough. I mean, but by and large, sort of at the boardroom level, everyone's like quite friendly. We had Stockport last weekend. I didn't see them, but I gather they were quite angry at the final whistle and left. Not in the best of moods. But that's that's understandable. It's a big game and it's a rivalry, and it's no. I've certainly shuffled off pretty quickly from a few stadia where we've got beaten. Personally, I have a strong philosophy that like you need to give people time, like in football, and it's something that's very rare commodity. And with Phil, we've been able to get him. He's like, I want this centre back, and we've pretty much been able to get them. Not all of them. There've been lots of people who are like, no. It's got easier as time's gone on because I think players initially are a bit like, is this all a bit of a joke? Is this sort of stupid thing? Am I going to go there and it's going to be like a prank show or sort of wacky or somehow stupid? And as we've gone on, it's been easy. Players generally are like, oh well, yeah, that's Wrexham's a real deal, and like it's really happening. But I think, it's not. I've already criticised Manchester United. I've got to run the Manchester Marathon soon. Between the United fans and Salford fans and Stockport fans, I'm going to get belted with fruit. If you could wrap a fiver around your fruit, you can throw anything at me. Thank you. But yeah, I think there is so much pressure. There's so much pressure to get results, so much pressure to get change. And obviously, an obvious thing is like change the manager. And you can do that at any time. Whereas you can only change your playing squad and personnel twice a year, and even then, you're rolling the dice each time. I mean, I think we have been incredibly fortunate in terms of the players we've brought in. We've had so few that haven't improved the team. We've had a few who've been brought in as backup and then have not been required. And so they perhaps for our fans are a bit like, "Ooh, why'd you sign that guy? He didn't do anything." It's like, well, he would have done something if the player who plays in his position was injured. But I do think that, again, going back to my point about Liverpool and why I think they've been successful in this last however many years, it feels like there is a long-term vision there. People don't always agree with how FSG go about it, but I think they have a plan of sorts, and they stick to it. And that actually is something that we're transitioning to more now. We were a little bit fly by the seat of our pants and like, this will do to get us out of here. Like, this is, we don't need to think 5-10 years in the future. We just got to get to May, and see what happens. And we're starting to be like, oh God, we might go in the Championship, and that's going to be really expensive and really hard. And how do we protect ourselves from yo-yoing up and down and all the difficulties that come with that?
And that was a question I wanted to explore with you, Humphrey, because you've spoken about almost the weather internally within the club, but the general climate in which you're going into now, the expectations are starting to rise. And how are you starting to protect yourself or prepare the club to deal with that high expectation?
I think the biggest challenge is that like the fairy tale or honeymoon period is sort of over, I think. By which I mean, I do think that if we get in the Championship next season and we get smashed like 6 games in a row for our first 6 games, people aren't going to be like, wow, but we're in the Championship, so this is an incredible achievement. That has changed enormously. I mean, even over the course of this season, pre-season, all our like fan podcasts and people on forums and people I spoke to in the supermarket were all like, oh, give me 10th or 12th. Like that'd be incredible. Like that'd be our highest league finish since 1974. Be absolutely magical. And then we've sat in sort of 1, 2, 3 for the whole season. But then in January we got 5 points from a possible 16 or no, well, that can't make sense. What would it be? 15. And suddenly people were like, get him out. Get him gone. Get the manager gone. Sack the players. Sign all new players. He's not fit to wear the shirt. People that have given their all for 3. People who will revert to being club legends in 6 months after they've been given the tin tack at the demand of the fans. Legend. Get the statue built. But in the here and now, it is we want to win. We want to win 3-0 every single game. And if we're not winning 3-0 every single game, something's wrong. And it's funny. I mean, explaining to Rob and Ryan and again, some of the people, at FX, the channel in the States, they're like, oh, how's the documentary going to work with X, Y, and Z? I was like, you're going to get a lot of drama. Like if you don't get promoted, like how will the documentary work kind of thing. It's like, well, it'll show the fact that suddenly the boot's on the other foot.
Do FX want to get promoted this season?
They always, they're in a very American way. They're just like, well, promotion every season even better. Like,
and are Rob and Ryan the same?
They are, but they are from a perspective of we all want to get promoted this season because the momentum we've got is hard to beat, right? Like we've got this core, and we would get promoted with players, probably 4 or 5 of our players who started the game that we got promoted from the National League with, and that's great. Like you've got those guys that have gone right the way through. Max Cleworth, Owen O'Connell, who else have we still got? Well, Paul Mullin, Ollie Palmer, those sorts of players that have been central to everything that we've done. But yeah, it will come with a big challenge because suddenly, we would need to probably quadruple our playing budget easily just to have a shot at staying in the Championship. And if you want to, finish mid-table, upper mid-table, you're talking about 6x or something like that, what we're doing. And if you want to get in the Premier League, it's 10x pretty much.
And have you spoken to Rob and Ryan about the possibility that people might turn on them? As unimaginable as it seems at the moment.
Yes. Actually, the very first thing I said to Ryan, not the first thing I said to him, but on that very first call, I said, just so you know, if we do this and we are successful with this, there will come a time when you are called a cunt in front of your kids in like Manchester Airport by a Wrexham fan because we will have lost 4 games in a row, in the Championship. We'll be teetering near relegation or we'll be doing something and someone will have a proper go at you in front of your kids. And he was like, right. And I was like, well, I'll try and be your cunt sponge. So anytime anyone hurls abuses, I'll eat that happily.
But it is a thing though in America.
Norwich,
I'm a Norwich fan. We have American owners.
Yeah.
And I remember talking to the wife of the Norwich owner, and she was saying to me, oh, yeah, we love sport because on the first day of the MLB season, they own a baseball team. She goes, we get picked up and we get put in an open-top truck and we get driven to the stadium and all the crowds are on the streets waving at us and cheering us. And then I throw the first pitch of the new season. And I was like, it's not like that in football.
Yeah.
Like, as an owner, you either put your money in and you're successful or fuck off.
Yeah.
Like, and also when you are putting your money in, it's slightly different for your owners because they're celebrities, but there's no credit for that. That's what's expected of the owner of a football club.
Yes. To do less than that is a crime. Well, I often cite the example of, again, FSG as a Liverpool fan in a former life, that in 2020, whenever Liverpool won the title after 30 years, I think it was 2020, in lockdown, that summer, the Twitter sphere was alive with the rumour that Liverpool were going to sign Timo Werner from wherever he was, Wolfsburg or Werder Bremen or somewhere. And he didn't. He went to Chelsea. And FSG out was trending on Twitter for a week. And the vitriol on there, these parasites, Now, I don't think a lot of these people are actually Liverpool fans. I think they are FIFA football fans the fans that like transfers but don't really care about anything else because they want to be able to like crow about how they signed, someone Eno, any kind of Brazilian, like, oh, we signed, we got I got Vinicius Jr. on FIFA Ultimate Teams, and like, can you imagine if we like City signed him in real life or whatever? And that to me was just a stark reminder. I was like, they just ended 30 years without a title. We won a Champions League the season before. This team is playing scintillating football. Like they've expanded Anfield in a sympathetic way that means more people can get into the old stadium. They're not demolished it and built a solar stadium outside of town. They're about as good a set of owners as you can get, other than the fact that they don't have unlimited coffers, and so they have to sort of try and go about it in a fairly sensible way. People hate them. And as you say, John Henry of Fenway Sports Group is not as charismatic and charming a person as Ryan Reynolds, and I think we gain a huge amount from that, and a huge amount from the fact that when they come to town, they'll go into Wrexham Miners Project, they'll go into a cafe, they go and talk to people, they go in face to face with people in a way that doesn't tend to get done by other owners. I mean, our players often talk about the fact they're like, I was at Birmingham City. Someone was telling me, I was at Birmingham City for 4 years and I never met the owner. I mean, that was, I don't know what owner that was. That was a while ago. Or, guys.
Well, John Eustace just left Blackburn to go to Derby.
Yes.
Because the big thing is when he got on the phone to Derby, the actual owner spoke to him.
Right.
And he'd hardly spoken to the Venkeys in years at Blackburn.
Yes.
But in those interactions that Ryan and Rob and yourself have had when you go out into Wrexham, has there ever been an exchange that has surprised them?
Gosh, there must have been. I mean, I'm trying to think of instances of that. I mean, I think for Ryan in particular, I think when he first arrived into Wrexham, it completely changed his perspective on the whole thing, because it had all been sort of at arm's length, and they would watch games on, no one in the stands, no fans there. They didn't make it to the club until October the 15th or something in the year. They'd owned the club for sort of 8-9 months at that stage. But because of COVID and this and that, they couldn't travel over. And when they came, I often cite, actually, not so much Wrexham, but the very first game they came to, we were away at Maidenhead United at, what's it called, London Road or something like that, the stadium there, which I think is the oldest continuous use, or that's I think they're just about to move, oldest continuous use league ground in the country or something like that. And it is properly rubbish in the loveliest way. It's very peeling, rusty barriers and leaky roof and terrace and a sort of a porter cabin with a bar in it. It's the sort of hospitality thing. And they came in. They got brought in through like a side gate, and because of all the cameras and it was at night and there were like lights filming them, immediately the sort of 800 Maidenhead fans that were there were aware that they were there, and just pelted them with abuse. And they loved it because, of course, they spend their whole lives, Ryan, I love you. Oh my God, I love you. Like, please sign this picture I have of you. And just all these Maidenhead fans were like, first we lost 3-2 and they were like, you bought the wrong club, which they love. What are they singing? It's like they're saying you bought the wrong club. But then also just like people just being like, again, stick your Deadpool up your arse, like you fucking talentless guy. Who's the small? I never fucking heard of him. Like, all this kind of stuff. And they sat in their chair and they're like, that's the best thing. I love that. Does that happen at every game? I was like, well, probably every away game you go to, you're going to get that off fans. And I think that surprised them. They love, like, when we got beaten by Grimsby in the playoff semi-final, the Grimsby fans, when they went like 4-3 up or something like that, they started singing like, we stink of fish, because, the Cod Army or whatever they are. And again, they were like, what? What are they saying? What are they saying? They're singing, we stink, they're saying they stink of fish. And they were like, what? Why? Why would anyone do that? It's like, well, I don't know. It's like that's their nickname. And they also sent us a load of herring or something like that in an ice box for Rob and Ryan. The Grimsby directors has been like, here's some fish,
welcome to English football,
welcome to English football. Yeah.
Do you think one day Wrexham under this ownership model will play in the Premier League?
I think it's very possible.
Yeah.
And the way it works is, we've got a minority investor in this season, the Allen family from upstate New York, who used to own a very successful medical equipment company. They made like all the stethoscopes in America and this and then they sold their company a long old time ago for a big chunk of change, and they bought a stake in the club, but a minority stake. And so they have impressive financial clout. Not again, not a petro state type clout, but they got good clout. But I think that if we get into the championship and we stabilize and we build our training ground, because we have a training ground, and we build our stand and we renovate the stadium, we get ourselves up to we've got a 20,000 seat modern-ish stadium that retains the charm. and we can make that jump. Then I think what happens is that Rob and Ryan go into their Rolodex and call up one of the dozens and dozens of people who've got in touch over the last 4 years and been like, "Hi, I am a multi-billionaire. I want to join in on this with you." And then they would sell either another minority stake or a slight majority stake or whatever it may be, where they would stay on, remain in their roles, but we would have someone who could help bankroll. Because I mean, basically, getting out of the Championship of the Premier League, you're just lighting money.
I mean, Rob and Ryan's, without specific numbers, their wealth is in the hundreds of millions or the tens of millions.
Yeah, hundreds, I would think.
So Rob and Ryan in the hundreds of millions combined. Yet once you're in the Premier League, you're talking billionaire.
Well, the Championship, I mean, a lot of teams projected to lose about 60 million quid a year in the Championship.
And Rob and Ryan couldn't do that.
Well, maybe for a bit. But again, one of the things we want to be really careful about is being as sustainable as possible.
Yeah.
The thing that remains a challenge, albeit we're working towards it in various different ways, is ensuring that if they get hit by a bus next week, we're not suddenly left up shit creek without a paddle. Because at the moment, they don't finance a huge amount of it, but they're the backstop. That means that we can go, yeah, all right, we will spend a little bit extra on this. We will spend a little bit extra on that. Because if we don't recoup that, we can go to them and be like, sorry, can you cut us a check for the difference? And going into the Championship, going into the Premier League, the income is much larger, the opportunity is much larger, the TV money, the this, or that, the other. But again, the Championship, next season, say, touch wood, we get promoted. I can't remember who the bottom three are at the moment in the Premier League: Southampton, Wolves, and
Leicester.
Somebody. Yeah, Leicester. Imagine we have to play them with all their many, many internationals, their parachute payments, their whatever. We'll get stomped by them realistically. And we know that, that's just the way it goes in that first season up for the Championship. But the hope is that against the bottom half of the Championship, with the right additions, we can kind of hold our own and do whatever, and we can exist in there. But even existing in there, we would lose a big chunk of money, and we would need to find a way to offset that.
Great. Time for some quick-fire questions
before
we wrap up. What do you point as your greatest moment since the takeover of Wrexham?
I would say, for me, although I said earlier that I think actually crying on the top of the bus stop on the open top bus after that thing, because from a personal perspective, it was a good cathartic moment. It's like, yes, I can still do it. I can still cry occasionally. But it was also what had triggered it was that we were driving through the centre of Wrexham, and we've been told to expect 15,000 people, something like that. We had 45,000 people out on the streets of Wrexham. And as we drove up the high street, there was a DJ on the bus in front of me, and she started playing Can't Help Falling in Love with You by Elvis, which is something that our fans sing on the stands. And it was on the high street that I had been cycling up every day during lockdown to go to the stadium that was boarded up. And there was the only things that were on there were with all the love in the world, a Primark and a Ladbrokes and a sort of a hospice care charity shop, and everything else was, and a Waterstones, but everything else was kind of gone. And as I was looking around, I was like, there are loads of these shops back open. There are all these people out on the street. It just felt like, we've done something amazing on the pitch, but actually what it's done to the town is even better.
Amazing.
What are the three non-negotiable behaviours that you feel have been central to Wrexham's success?
Gosh. Without wanting to say boring answers, I think honesty and hard work, because that, I think, is exactly what Phil has driven into his players, and actually we have taken inspiration, I think, in the C-suite, as they say in America. Upstairs, we've been a bit like, yeah, they're very honest with each other. They call each other out when they're not working hard enough, but they rarely do that because they work really, really hard. So I'm going to say honesty, hard work, and I think, and compassion, I think is a big one. It's not we're not a harsh corporate environment. We're very understanding, and how that manifests itself, I think, is, I go back to that point about everyone's pretty good at delegating and understands, you're given the responsibility, I'm going to be compassionate towards you. If you're unable to do it, I will listen to why. It's not the end of your participation in this. We'll look to learn together and then do it better next time.
Great. And the final question, your one golden rule for anyone who's listened to this fascinating conversation to live their own high performance life.
Mine is practice radical kindness. that I think, because that is the thing that sort of got me to where I am in my life, you know. And if anybody wants to try and follow this weird pathway into a strange job, my thing that I have always done is very forgiving of people, and I suffer fools, I suffer wrongs relatively happy. I mean, it goes back to my equilibrium thing. And actually what that has allowed me to is I've never wasted any energy on anything that is negative in my life. I don't think. I've never lost time staring out of a window trying to think of how I get back at people who've wronged me. I look into the room and I look at my wife and I look at my dog and I go, this is great. I'm doing all right.
Thank you so much. Love that conversation.
Thank you.
You know what I really love? Sitting in this room, having the incredible conversations that you get to watch on High Performance. But something else I love is taking the lessons and the learnings from the likes of KSI and Arnold Schwarzenegger and Matthew McConaughey and all these other incredible guests we've had on High Performance, and taking them out to you, to your businesses, to your people. And whether it's sitting around a small group of 6 senior leaders or maybe in an auditorium with 2,000 or 3,000 staff members, myself and Damien just love helping you and your people get closer to your own version of high performance. And we've done it in Germany, in Dubai, in North America, in South Africa, you name it. We've traveled the world sharing our message of high performance. And if you'd love us to come and work with you and your business, all you have to do is hit the link in the description and we will be with you, getting you and your team closer to high performance.